It was a typical Tuesday evening when I got home from work. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across my quiet suburban neighborhood. I had just moved into this house a few weeks ago, thrilled by the idea of having my own space after years of apartment living. Little did I know, the excitement of new beginnings would soon be overshadowed by an unsettling series of events. After a quick dinner, I decided to unwind with some TV. The soft hum of the news anchor's voice was almost comforting as I settled into my couch. My cat, Muffin, curled up next to me, purring contentedly. Everything seemed normal until I noticed Muffin's ears perk up. She was staring intently at the front window, her tail twitching. I followed her gaze but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Shrugging it off as one of her quirky habits, I returned to my show. However, Muffin's behavior grew more agitated. She started pacing back and forth, occasionally glancing at me as if trying to convey something. I felt a knot form in my stomach, but told myself it was probably just a stray animal outside. Later that night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint tapping noise. It sounded like it was coming from the front door. I paused, listening carefully, but the sound stopped. Dismissing it as the house settling, I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. Around 2 a.m., I woke up suddenly. At first, I wasn't sure why, but then I heard it again. Soft tapping, more insistent this time. My heart raced as I lay there, straining to hear. The tapping turned into a scratching sound, like something trying to get in. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but before hitting call, the noise stopped abruptly. Silence. I held my breath, waiting for something, anything. After a few tense minutes, I convinced myself it was just my imagination and tried to go back to sleep. The next morning, I inspected the front door but found nothing unusual. No scratches, no signs of forced entry. Still, the sense of unease lingered. I decided to install a security camera, hoping to catch whatever was causing these disturbances. The following night, everything seemed calm. I kept checking my phone for alerts from the camera but received none. I was beginning to think I had overreacted. Just as I was about to drift off, my phone buzzed. An alert from the camera. My heart pounded as I opened the app. The live feed showed the empty street, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. Then the image flickered. A shadow moved across the porch. I couldn't make out any details, but it was unmistakable. Someone was there. I called the police, and within minutes they arrived. They searched the property but found no one. The officer suggested it might have been a prank or a stray animal triggering the motion sensor. But I knew it wasn't. Someone had been watching me. Over the next few days, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I started noticing small things out of place. Items moved, doors slightly ajar. Muffin's behavior grew more erratic, always on edge, staring at corners of the room as if seeing something I couldn't. One night, I decided to stay up and keep watch. Armed with a baseball bat and my phone, I sat in the dark living room, every noise amplifying my paranoia. Around 3 a.m., the tapping started again, this time at the back door. I crept towards the kitchen, heart hammering in my chest. The scratching was louder now, more desperate. I raised the bat, ready to confront whatever or whoever was out there. Just as I reached for the door handle, the noise stopped. Silence. I yanked the door open, but the backyard was empty. I stepped outside, scanning the shadows. Nothing. Then I felt it. A cold breeze, almost like a breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but no one was there. I retreated inside, bolting the door behind me. The next morning, I reviewed the camera footage. My blood ran cold as I watched a figure approach the back door, cloaked in darkness. They seemed to know exactly where the camera's blind spots were, their movements deliberate and unnerving. They lingered for a moment, then disappeared into the night. Desperation led me to install more cameras, upgrade the locks, and even get a dog for added security. Yet, the feeling of being watched persisted. I couldn't shake the sense that whoever it was would return. Each night, I lay awake, ears straining for any sound, eyes scanning the shadows. Weeks turned into months, and the disturbances gradually stopped. But the fear never left. Every creak, every rustle sent my heart racing. I started avoiding being alone in the house, inviting friends over as often as possible. But even surrounded by others, I felt that unseen presence lurking just out of sight. One evening, as I was sitting on the porch with a friend, I saw a flash of movement from the corner of my eye. I turned, but there was nothing there. My friend noticed my unease and asked if I was okay. I forced a smile, not wanting to seem paranoid. As the months went by, I slowly adjusted to a new normal, always vigilant, always aware. The feeling of being watched never truly disappeared, but I learned to live with it. I never found out who or what was behind the disturbances, and maybe it was better that way. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Even now, as I sit here typing this, I occasionally glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see that shadowy figure standing in the doorway. The fear has become a part of me, a constant reminder that sometimes the scariest things are the ones we can't see. And that feeling of being watched, it never really goes away. Ever since I was a child, I loved exploring forests. The sense of adventure, the thrill of the unknown, and the beauty of nature always drew me in. So, when my friend Mike suggested a weekend camping trip in a remote forest we hadn't explored before, I was all in. Little did I know, this trip would be unlike any other. We set out early on a Friday morning, the car packed with camping gear and enough supplies for a couple of days. The forest was about a 3-hour drive from our hometown, nestled in a part of the state known for its dense woods and minimal human activity. By noon, we had arrived at the trailhead, ready to embark on our adventure. The first day was perfect. We hiked deep into the forest, marveling at the towering trees and the serene beauty of the untouched wilderness. As evening approached, we found a suitable clearing to set up camp. We pitched our tents, gathered some firewood, and settled in for a peaceful night under the stars. Around the campfire, we shared stories and laughed, the crackling fire and the sounds of the forest creating a calming backdrop. As the night grew darker, a chill settled in the air, and we decided to turn in for the night. I crawled into my sleeping bag, feeling content and exhausted from the day's hike. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but it was still pitch dark outside. At first, I wasn't sure what had disturbed my sleep, but then I heard it, a faint rustling sound outside my tent. My heart started to race as I lay there, listening intently. The sound grew louder, like something or someone moving through the underbrush. "Mike, you hear that?" I whispered, hoping he was awake. There was no response. I unzipped my tent just enough to peek outside. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting an eerie light around the campsite. I couldn't see anything unusual, but the rustling continued, now accompanied by a low, almost guttural sound. My instincts told me to stay put, but curiosity got the better of me. Grabbing my flashlight, I slowly exited the tent, trying to be as quiet as possible. I shone the beam of light around the campsite, scanning for any signs of movement. The forest was thick with shadows, making it hard to see anything clearly. As I took a few cautious steps towards the source of the noise, it suddenly stopped. I stood there, holding my breath, listening to the deafening silence. Just as I was about to turn back, I heard a twig snap behind me. I spun around, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness, but again, there was nothing there. My nerves were on edge, and I decided it was best to wake Mike. "Mike, wake up!" I whispered urgently as I shook his tent. He groaned and slowly emerged, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on?" he asked, sounding annoyed. "Something's out there. I heard noises, and it doesn't feel right," I explained, my voice trembling slightly. He sighed and grabbed his own flashlight. "All right, let's check it out." We ventured into the darkness together, our flashlights piercing the thick shadows. We walked a few yards from the campsite, our senses heightened, but found nothing. Just as we were about to head back, Mike froze. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. I strained my ears and heard it too. A soft, almost whispering sound, like voices carried by the wind. We exchanged a nervous glance and followed the sound, moving deeper into the forest. The whispers grew louder, more distinct, but we couldn't make out any words. It felt like the forest itself was alive, watching us, drawing us in. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin. The structure was barely standing, overgrown with vines and covered in moss. The door hung loosely on its hinges, creaking eerily in the breeze. The whispers seemed to be coming from inside. "Should we go in?" Mike asked, his voice barely audible. I nodded, my curiosity outweighing my fear. We approached the cabin cautiously, the floorboards creaking under our weight as we stepped inside. The interior was dark and musty, filled with the remnants of a long-forgotten past. Old furniture lay in disarray, and strange symbols were carved into the walls. As we explored the cabin, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from a trapdoor in the floor, partially hidden under a rotting rug. With a sense of dread, we lifted the rug and pried open the trapdoor. A set of stairs led down into the darkness. "Are you sure about this?" Mike asked, his face pale. I nodded, swallowing hard. "We've come this far." We descended the stairs, the air growing colder with each step. At the bottom, we found a small, dimly lit room. The walls were covered in strange, almost ritualistic markings. In the center of the room was an old wooden table with an open book on it. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. I approached the table and looked at the book. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, detailing some sort of ritual. As I read, a sense of unease washed over me. The writing spoke of summoning an ancient presence, something that watched and waited in the darkness. Just then, the whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a deep, resonant silence. Mike and I stood frozen, our hearts pounding. We could feel a presence in the room, something unseen but undeniably there. The air felt heavy, oppressive, as if we were being watched by countless unseen eyes. "Let's get out of here," I said, my voice barely a whisper. We turned to leave, but as we reached the stairs, the trapdoor above slammed shut with a force that shook the room. Panic set in as we tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. We were trapped. In the darkness, we felt the presence closing in, the air growing colder. It was as if the forest itself had come alive, intent on keeping us there. Desperation and fear took over as we pounded on the door, shouting for help, but our voices seemed to be swallowed by the darkness. Hours passed, or maybe it was minutes, it was impossible to tell. Just when I thought we would be trapped forever, the trapdoor creaked open. We scrambled up the stairs, not daring to look back. As we emerged from the cabin, the first light of dawn was breaking through the trees. We ran back to our campsite, grabbed our gear, and left the forest without looking back. We never spoke of that night again. The experience left a scar, a lingering fear of what lurked in the depths of the forest. Even now, years later, I can't shake the feeling that something is still watching, waiting for us to return. And as much as I loved exploring forests, I've never set foot in one again. Cave exploring had always fascinated me. The idea of venturing into the Earth's hidden chambers, discovering places untouched by human hands, was thrilling. So, when my old college friend Sarah suggested a weekend trip to explore a newly discovered cave system, I eagerly agreed. We gathered our gear and set out early on a crisp Saturday morning. The cave was located in a remote part of the state, far from any signs of civilization. The drive was long, but the anticipation kept us energized. By the time we arrived, the sun was high, casting a warm glow over the entrance to the cave. The mouth of the cave was unassuming, a dark, gaping hole in the side of a rocky hill. We geared up, double-checking our ropes, helmets, and lights. With a mixture of excitement and nervousness, we entered the cave, our lights cutting through the darkness. The first few hours were incredible. The cave was vast, with towering stalagmites and glittering mineral deposits lining the walls. We marveled at the beauty of the underground world, snapping photos and mapping our route. As we ventured deeper, the passages grew narrower and more labyrinthine. After a while, we found ourselves in a large chamber with several tunnels branching off in different directions. We decided to take a short break, drinking water and munching on energy bars. The air was cool and still, and the only sound was the distant dripping of water. "Which way next?" Sarah asked, her voice echoing slightly in the chamber. I consulted our map. "I think we should try that tunnel," I said, pointing to a narrow passage on the far side of the chamber. It seemed to lead deeper into the cave, and we were eager to see more. We squeezed through the narrow opening, our lights barely illuminating the path ahead. The tunnel twisted and turned, growing narrower with each step. Just as I was about to suggest turning back, the passage opened into another chamber. This one was smaller but filled with an eerie, bluish light emanating from bioluminescent fungi on the walls. "Wow, this is incredible," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with awe. We carefully explored the chamber, mindful of the slippery floor. As we were about to head back, I noticed a small crevice in the far wall. It was just big enough to crawl through. Curiosity got the better of me. "I'm going to check this out," I said, dropping to my hands and knees. Sarah hesitated. "Are you sure? It looks pretty tight." "I'll be fine. I just want to see what's on the other side," I reassured her. I crawled through the crevice, my heart pounding with excitement. The tunnel was narrow and claustrophobic, but after a few yards, it opened into a small, hidden chamber. My light revealed ancient-looking carvings on the walls, unlike anything I had ever seen before. "Sarah, you have to see this," I called back, my voice echoing eerily. I heard her crawling through the crevice behind me. As she joined me in the chamber, we both stared in awe at the carvings. They depicted strange, humanoid figures and symbols that seemed to tell a story, though their meaning was lost to us. "This is incredible. These must be ancient," Sarah said, her voice filled with wonder. We spent some time examining the carvings, trying to decipher their meaning. Then suddenly our lights flickered. We exchanged worried glances and tapped our helmets, but the lights continued to dim. Panic set in as the chamber plunged into darkness. "Okay, we need to get out of here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We scrambled back to the crevice, but as we started to crawl through, a loud rumble echoed through the cave. The ground shook, and rocks began to fall around us. We hurriedly crawled out, emerging back into the bioluminescent chamber, but the tunnel we had come through was now blocked by fallen rocks. "Great, we're trapped," Sarah said, her voice trembling. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "We need to find another way out. Let's try one of the other tunnels." We chose a passage at random and started walking, our dim lights barely piercing the darkness. The tunnel seemed endless, and I began to worry we were walking in circles. The air grew colder, and an oppressive silence settled around us. As we pressed on, we started hearing strange noises, faint whispers and distant, echoing footsteps. I tried to convince myself it was just the sound of our own movements, distorted by the cave's acoustics. But the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered, her eyes wide with fear. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We quickened our pace, desperate to find an exit. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the tunnel seemed to close in around us. Just when I thought we couldn't take it any longer, we stumbled into another chamber. This one was different. The air was stale, and the walls were covered in strange, pulsating growths. In the center of the chamber was a pit, from which a sickly, greenish light emanated. The whispers were loud now, almost deafening, coming from the pit. "We need to get out of here, now," I said, my voice barely audible over the noise. We turned to leave, but the tunnel behind us had vanished. In its place was a solid wall of rock. Panic set in as we realized we were truly trapped. The whispers turned into a cacophony of voices, and the ground beneath us began to shake. With no other option, we approached the pit. The light was blinding, and the air grew colder the closer we got. As we peered into the depths, the ground gave way beneath us, and we were pulled into the pit. I don't remember much of what happened next. A sense of falling, an overwhelming cold, and the whispers, always the whispers. When I came to, I was lying on the floor of a different chamber. Sarah was beside me, unconscious but breathing. We were in a large, open space, the walls covered in the same strange growths. The light was dim, but enough to see that we were not alone. Shadowy figures moved in the darkness, watching us with unblinking eyes. I shook Sarah awake, and we both scrambled to our feet. The figures didn't move, just watched as we backed away. We found a tunnel and ran, not caring where it led as long as it was away from that chamber. After what felt like hours, we emerged into the open air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the entrance to the cave. We collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. We never spoke of what happened in the cave. The experience left us both scarred, haunted by the memories of the whispers and the figures in the darkness. I haven't been cave exploring since that day, and I doubt I ever will again. Some places are meant to remain hidden, their secrets buried deep within the earth, never to be uncovered. The first night alone in my new house was supposed to be exciting. After years of saving, I finally had my own place, a charming old Victorian tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. My friends had helped me move in, and after a long day of unpacking, they left around sunset. I relished the silence, feeling a sense of accomplishment as I settled into the creaky, yet cozy, space. I made myself a quick dinner and decided to relax on the couch with a book. The house was peaceful, the kind of quiet that comes with being far from the city's constant hum. The only sounds were the occasional creaks and groans of the old house settling. I had always loved the character of old homes, and this one was no different. Around 11 p.m., I started to feel sleepy. I locked all the doors and windows, double-checking each one out of a cautious habit. The house felt safe, and I was confident in my security measures. I climbed the narrow staircase to my bedroom, brushed my teeth, and changed into pajamas. After turning off the lights, I slipped under the covers, ready for a good night's sleep. I must have fallen asleep quickly because the next thing I knew, I was waking up to a strange noise. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like something lightly hitting glass. I sat up, disoriented, and glanced at the clock, 2:34 a.m. My heart began to race as I listened intently, trying to pinpoint the source. The tapping continued, faint but persistent. I got out of bed and crept toward the window. The moon cast a pale light over the backyard, and everything seemed still. I opened the window slightly and strained to hear. The tapping stopped. I waited a few more minutes before convincing myself it was just a tree branch against the window. With a sigh of relief, I closed the window and climbed back into bed. Just as I was about to drift off, the tapping resumed, louder this time. It wasn't coming from the window. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the sound was coming from downstairs. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, feeling my way through the dark house. The wooden floors creaked under my feet as I descended the stairs, every sound amplified in the silence. The tapping grew louder as I reached the bottom of the stairs. It was coming from the kitchen. I took a deep breath and slowly moved towards the sound. The kitchen was dark, but the moonlight streaming through the window provided enough light to see by. I scanned the room, my eyes adjusting to the dim light. Then I saw it. The back door was slightly ajar, swaying gently with each tap against the doorframe. My heart pounded as I approached, flashlight beams sweeping the room. I was sure I had locked it before going to bed. With trembling hands, I reached out and closed the door, making sure to lock it this time. I checked all the other doors and windows again, but they were all secure. Feeling uneasy, I returned to bed, leaving a light on in the hallway for some comfort. It took a while, but eventually, exhaustion won over, and I drifted off to sleep again. I woke up to a cold breeze. My eyes snapped open, and I realized my bedroom door was open. I distinctly remembered closing it before going to bed. I sat up, my heart racing once more. As I listened, I heard it again. Soft, deliberate footsteps, moving slowly up the stairs. I grabbed my phone, ready to call 911. My hands were shaking so much that I struggled to unlock the screen. The footsteps stopped right outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, praying it was my imagination. Then, the door handle turned, and the door creaked open. I pointed the flashlight at the door, illuminating the hallway. There was no one there. I could feel the cold sweat on my forehead as I slowly got out of bed and walked to the door. My mind was racing, trying to rationalize what was happening. I checked every room upstairs, finding nothing out of place. I went back to my bedroom and locked the door behind me. I sat on the bed, clutching my phone, too scared to sleep. Minutes felt like hours as I sat there, listening for any sound. Then I heard it, a soft, almost inaudible whisper. It was coming from the attic. I didn't want to investigate, but I couldn't ignore it. I gathered my courage, grabbed a heavy flashlight as a potential weapon, and slowly made my way to the attic entrance. The whispering grew louder as I approached. It sounded like multiple voices, all speaking in hushed tones. The attic hatch was in the hallway ceiling, accessible by a pull-down ladder. With trembling hands, I reached up and pulled the cord. The ladder unfolded with a creak, and a gust of cold air rushed down. I shone the flashlight into the dark attic, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "Hello!" I called out, my voice shaking. The whispering stopped abruptly. The silence was deafening. I climbed the ladder, each step feeling like an eternity. When my head finally cleared the hatch, I swept the flashlight around the attic. It was empty except for old furniture and boxes left by the previous owners. Nothing seemed out of place. As I turned to climb back down, something caught my eye. A small, dusty box tucked away in a corner. I don't know what compelled me, but I crawled over and opened it. Inside were old photographs and letters, all from the early 1900s. They depicted a family that once lived in the house, their faces serious and somber. I brought the box down with me, feeling a strange connection to its contents. Back in my bedroom, I sifted through the items, trying to understand their significance. One letter stood out. It was dated 1923 and written in elegant cursive. Dearest Margaret, underscore the house has been restless since the accident. We hear the whispers at night, the footsteps in the halls. It feels as though the very walls are alive, watching us. I fear we cannot stay much longer. The children are frightened, and I worry for our safety. Underscore yours forever, Mr. Henry. As I read the letter, a chill ran down my spine. The whispers, the footsteps, it was all happening again. I looked around my room, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon me. I decided to leave the house that night. Grabbing my essentials, I drove to a friend's place, my heart still racing. I never returned to that house alone again. The whispers, the footsteps, the cold breezes, they belonged to the past, a past that refused to stay buried. Even now, whenever I think of that night, I can almost hear the soft tapping, the whispering voices. The house still stands, empty and waiting, its secrets hidden in the shadows, longing for someone to listen. Working the night shift at the convenience store was usually uneventful. Sure, the occasional drunk or rowdy customer came in, but most nights were quiet. I liked the solitude, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of the fluorescent lights. It was my chance to catch up on reading or my studies, but that night was different. It started like any other shift. I clocked in at 10 p.m., greeted the day shift worker as they left, and settled behind the counter. The store was small, tucked away in a sleepy part of town. We had a few regulars who came in for late-night snacks or cigarettes, but by midnight, things usually slowed down. Around 1 a.m., the store was empty. I was reading a book when the front door chimed, signaling a customer. I looked up to see a man enter. He was tall, with a hood pulled over his head, casting his face in shadow. He walked with a deliberate slowness, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum floor. "Evening," I called out, trying to be friendly. He didn't respond, just continued to walk through the aisles. I watched him on the security monitor, feeling a strange sense of unease. There was something off about the way he moved, almost like he was floating rather than walking. He finally approached the counter, placing a single can of soda on it. As I rang him up, he finally looked up, and I saw his eyes. They were unsettlingly cold, almost empty. He handed me a crumpled bill, his fingers brushing mine. They were ice cold. "Thanks," I said, handing him his change. He took the soda and left without another word. The door chimed as he exited, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. Trying to shake off the feeling, I returned to my book, but my concentration was broken. The store was quiet again, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every now and then, I'd glance up at the security monitor, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows. The hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Around 3 a.m., the door chimed again. I looked up, expecting another customer, but the store was empty. I checked the monitor, but there was no sign of anyone. I got up and walked around the store, my heart pounding. I checked the aisles, the bathroom, and even the storage room, but found nothing. I returned to the counter, my nerves on edge. Just as I sat down, the lights flickered. It was brief, but enough to make my heart race. I glanced at the security monitor and froze. The screen showed a figure standing in the back of the store, but there was no one there. I grabbed the baseball bat we kept under the counter and cautiously made my way to the back. My footsteps echoed in the silence, the only sound in the otherwise quiet store. I reached the spot where the figure had been, but it was empty. The air felt colder, and I could see my breath. As I stood there, trying to steady my breathing, the lights flickered again. The cold intensified, and I heard a faint whisper, so soft it was almost imperceptible. I strained to hear, but it faded away. Deciding I'd had enough, I returned to the counter and picked up the phone to call my manager. As I dialed, the line went dead. The store's phone system had never failed before. I pulled out my cell phone, but it had no signal, something that never happened. The door chimed again. I looked up, dreading what I might see. The tall man was back, standing just inside the entrance. His hood was down now, revealing a pale, gaunt face with hollow eyes. He stared at me, unblinking. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't respond, just stared. The cold seemed to radiate from him, filling the store with an unnatural chill. I clutched the baseball bat, ready to defend myself, but he made no move to approach. The lights flickered once more, plunging the store into darkness. I heard the whispering again, louder this time, echoing off the walls. I could make out words now, a jumble of voices all speaking at once, but I couldn't understand them. When the lights came back on, the man was gone. The door hadn't chimed, and there was no sign of him on the security monitor. I checked the entire store again, but it was empty. The cold lingered, though, and the sense of being watched was stronger than ever. I spent the rest of my shift behind the counter, the baseball bat in hand, jumping at every sound. By the time the morning shift worker arrived, I was exhausted and shaken. "Rough night?" he asked, seeing my pale face and trembling hands. "Yeah, you could say that," I replied, not wanting to go into details. I clocked out and left the store, the morning sun a welcome sight. I never worked the night shift again. Whatever had happened that night, I couldn't explain it. The store seemed normal during the day, but I knew better. The night brought out the shadows, and I wasn't about to face them again. Driving alone at night had never bothered me. In fact, I often enjoyed it. The quiet, empty roads gave me a sense of peace and freedom. So when my friend Emily asked me to pick her up from a late-night party in a town about 2 hours away, I didn't hesitate to say yes. I left around midnight, the cool summer air flowing through the open windows of my car. The highway was nearly deserted, and I found myself slipping into a relaxed state, the rhythmic thrum of the tires on asphalt lulling me into a comfortable calm. About an hour into the drive, I realized I needed gas. I pulled off at the next exit, finding a lone gas station on the outskirts of a small, sleepy town. The station was old and worn, the kind that looked like it hadn't changed in decades. I parked at one of the pumps and got out, the cold night air making me shiver. As I started filling the tank, I noticed a figure inside the station's tiny convenience store. It was an elderly man, watching me from behind the counter. His face was expressionless, almost blank, as if he were in a trance. I gave him a polite nod, but he didn't react. Feeling uneasy, I finished pumping gas and went inside to pay. The door creaked loudly as I entered, and the man's eyes seemed to follow my every move. I approached the counter, handing him a 20. "Pump 3, I said, trying to sound cheerful. He took the money without a word, his eyes never leaving mine. I glanced around the store, noticing how outdated everything seemed. Dusty shelves held a sparse assortment of goods, and a small TV in the corner played static. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Thanks," I said, taking my change and hurrying back to my car. As I got back on the highway, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man's blank stare haunted me, and the whole experience left me feeling unsettled. I turned on the radio to distract myself, but the static that greeted me was even more unnerving. I flipped through the stations, finding nothing but more static and faint, unintelligible voices. About 30 minutes later, I saw headlights approaching in my rearview mirror. They were bright and getting closer fast. I moved to the right lane to let the car pass, but instead, it matched my speed and stayed right behind me. Annoyed, I sped up, hoping to lose the tailgater, but the car stayed with me, its headlights glaring in my mirrors. I couldn't see the driver through the brightness, and an uneasy feeling settled in my stomach. I slowed down, hoping they would pass, but they just slowed down too, keeping the same distance. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I realized this wasn't just some impatient driver. My mind raced with possibilities. Was it the old man from the gas station? Was I being followed? I decided to take the next exit and see if they would follow. As I turned off the highway, the car stayed right behind me. Panic started to set in. I took a few random turns, trying to shake them, but they were relentless. The roads were deserted. No other cars or signs of life anywhere. Finally, I saw a small diner up ahead, its neon sign flickering in the darkness. I pulled into the parking lot, hoping the presence of other people would deter whoever was following me. I parked near the entrance and jumped out of my car, heading straight for the diner's door. The other car pulled in too, parking a few spaces away. I glanced back as I reached the door, but the driver didn't get out. The headlights were still on, glaring through the dark. I burst into the diner, the warm light and the sound of clinking dishes a stark contrast to the cold, silent night outside. The waitress behind the counter looked up, surprised to see a customer at this hour. "Everything okay?" she asked, noticing my distress. "Yeah," Just needed a break from driving. I lied, trying to calm my racing heart. I took a seat by the window, keeping an eye on the car outside. It was still there, headlights off now, but I could see a shadowy figure inside. I ordered a coffee, my hands shaking as I brought the cup to my lips. Minutes passed, and the car remained in the parking lot. I wondered if I should call the police, but what would I say? That a car had been following me? Seemed so vague, so paranoid. After about 20 minutes, the car suddenly started and drove off, disappearing into the night. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I stayed in the diner for a while longer, finishing my coffee and trying to regain my composure. When I finally felt calm enough to leave, I cautiously walked back to my car, scanning the parking lot for any signs of the mysterious vehicle. It was gone. The drive to Emily's was uneventful, but my nerves were on edge the whole way. I picked her up and told her what had happened. She listened, wide-eyed, and insisted we take a different route home. We did, and the rest of the night passed without incident. I still think about that night sometimes, the eerie gas station and the car that followed me. I don't know who it was or what they wanted, but I learned to trust my instincts. Now, whenever I drive alone at night, I'm always on high alert, hyper-aware of every car that comes too close, every shadow that seems out of place. Some experiences, no matter how unexplained, leave a mark that never fades. It was a slow Friday night, and I found myself scrolling aimlessly through Facebook, catching up on the latest posts from friends and family. A lot of people were out having fun, but I had opted for a quiet night at home. The familiar blue and white interface was comforting, a digital window into the lives of those I cared about. Around 11 p.m., I received a friend request from an account I didn't recognize. The profile picture was blank, and the name was simply John Doe. Normally, I would ignore such requests, but curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on the profile to find more information, but there was nothing. No posts, no friends, no photos. Just the basic details. John Doe joined Facebook today. I hesitated for a moment before accepting the request. Almost immediately, I received a message. Hello. I stared at the screen, wondering who this person was. Could have been a prank by someone I knew, so I decided to play along. Hi, do I know you? I typed back. There was a brief pause before the next message appeared. No, but I know you. A chill ran down my spine. I glanced around my dimly lit room, suddenly feeling exposed. The logical part of my brain tried to rationalize it. Someone was just messing with me. Who is this? I typed, feeling a bit unnerved. Let's play a game, the message read. I'll give you a clue, and you have to find something. Against my better judgment, I decided to continue the conversation. What kind of game? You'll see. Go to your kitchen. My heart started to race. How did this person know I was at home? My curiosity now mixed with a sense of dread. I got up and walked cautiously to the kitchen, phone in hand. The house was silent, the only sound being the soft hum of the refrigerator. I'm in the kitchen. Now what? I messaged, feeling a bit foolish. Look on the top shelf of the pantry. I opened the pantry door and reached up to the top shelf. There, behind a box of cereal, was a small, dusty photo album I hadn't seen in years. I pulled it down, my hands shaking slightly. I hadn't even remembered putting it there. How did you know about this? I typed, my anxiety growing. Open it. I flipped through the album, finding old photos of my childhood. As I reached the last page, my breath caught in my throat. There, tucked into the back cover, was a photograph I didn't recognize. It was of me taken from outside my window, looking directly at the camera. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. Who are you? I typed, my fingers trembling. The response came almost immediately. Someone who's been watching. I felt a wave of nausea. This was no prank. I rushed to the windows, checking the locks and peering out into the darkness. There was no sign of anyone, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. "Leave me alone," I typed furiously, my fear turning to anger. "Don't be scared. I'm closer than you think." I felt a sudden urge to call the police, but as I reached for my phone, the power in the house went out. The room plunged into darkness, and my phone screen was the only source of light. Panic set in as I stumbled to find a flashlight. My phone buzzed with another message. "Check your front door." I didn't want to go, but I had to know. Grabbing the flashlight, I cautiously approached the front door. With a deep breath, I unlocked it and slowly opened it, shining the light outside. There, on the doorstep, was a single black envelope. I picked it up, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I tore it open and pulled out a note. "Did you enjoy the game?" I dropped the note, slamming the door shut and locking it. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. I dialed 911, my voice trembling as I explained the situation to the operator. They assured me that a patrol car would be sent to my house immediately. I waited by the window, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. The minutes felt like hours. Finally, I saw the flashing lights of the patrol car pulling up. 2 officers got out and approached my door. I let them in, explaining everything that had happened. They searched the house and the surrounding area but found no signs of anyone. The photo and the note were taken as evidence, but without any leads, there wasn't much they could do. They promised to keep an eye on the area and left me with a sense of uneasy reassurance. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept all the lights on, jumping at every little sound. By morning, I was exhausted but determined to find out who was behind this. I reported the incident to Facebook, hoping they could trace the account, but I never received any follow-up. Days turned into weeks, and life slowly returned to normal. But I never felt truly safe again. Every time I logged into Facebook, I couldn't help but glance at my friend requests, half expecting another message from John Doe. The sense of being watched never fully went away, a constant reminder of that terrifying night. I still don't know who was behind it or how they knew so much about me, but one thing is certain: I will never accept a friend request from a stranger again. Some connections are better left unmade, and some games are too dangerous to play. I've always been a thrifty shopper, so when I spotted an old roll-top desk on Craigslist for a steal, I couldn't resist. The listing had few details, but the photos showed a beautiful, albeit dusty, piece of furniture that just needed some TLC. The seller's description was brief: old desk, needs work, price to sell. It seemed like the perfect project for a rainy weekend. I contacted the seller, who responded quickly and gave me directions to his place. It was an hour's drive from my apartment, in a rural area I'd never been to before. He seemed eager to make the sale, which I took as a good sign. No haggling, just a straightforward transaction. The drive was uneventful, though as I got closer to the address, the surroundings became more remote. The GPS led me down a series of winding roads, past fields and forests, until I finally arrived at a narrow dirt road flanked by dense woods. The house at the end of the road was a weathered, 2-story structure that looked like it had seen better days. I parked in front and got out, noting the eerie stillness of the place. No other cars were in sight, and the windows of the house were dark. I double-checked the address. This was definitely the place. I knocked on the front door, which creaked open slightly at my touch. "Hello," I called out, my voice echoing inside. There was no answer, just the unsettling quiet. I stepped inside cautiously, the floorboards creaking underfoot. "Hello," I repeated louder this time. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard a faint shuffling sound. A moment later, a man appeared at the far end of the hallway. He was tall and thin, with unkempt hair and a tired expression. He wore old, tattered clothes and looked like he hadn't slept in days. "You must be here for the desk," he said, his voice raspy. "Yeah, I am," I replied, trying to sound confident. Is it still available? He nodded and gestured for me to follow him. We walked through the dimly lit house, the air thick with dust and the smell of decay. As we passed through the rooms, I noticed old furniture covered in sheets and stacks of newspapers piled high. The whole place had a feeling of neglect, as if it had been abandoned for years. We reached a room at the back of the house, and there it was, the roll-top desk, just as beautiful and aged as in the photos. I inspected it closely, running my hand over the worn wood. It was perfect for what I had in mind, but something about the situation felt off. The man's presence, the state of the house, it all set my nerves on edge. "It's a nice piece," I said, trying to break the tension. "I'll take it." The man nodded again, his eyes never quite meeting mine. "I'll help you load it into your car," he said. I followed him back through the house and out the front door. As we wrestled the desk into my car, I noticed how strong he was despite his frail appearance. Once it was secured, I thanked him and handed over the cash. He took it without a word, stuffing it into his pocket. As I got into my car, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I glanced back at the house and saw the man standing on the porch, staring at me with that same weary expression. I drove away, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The drive back felt longer than the trip out. The image of the man and his eerie house stayed with me, and I couldn't wait to get home. When I finally pulled into my driveway, I hurried to unload the desk and get it inside. I spent the next few hours cleaning and polishing the desk, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. As I worked, I found an old, rusted key taped to the underside of one of the drawers. Intrigued, I tried it in the desk's lock, and to my surprise, it fit perfectly. The lock clicked open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, there were several old photographs, letters, and a worn leather journal. The photos were black and white, showing a younger version of the man I had met, along with a woman and a small child. The letters were dated decades ago, written in a hurried, almost frantic hand. Curiosity getting the better of me, I opened the journal. The entries were cryptic, detailing the man's descent into paranoia and isolation. He wrote of strange occurrences, mysterious figures watching the house, and an overwhelming sense of dread that he couldn't escape. The last entry was particularly chilling. "They're getting closer. I can feel their eyes on me even now. I must protect the desk. It holds the key to everything." A chill ran down my spine. I closed the journal and looked at the desk, now gleaming with the care I had given it. What had I brought into my home? The man's desperation, his fear. It all seemed tied to this piece of furniture. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house, every whisper of the wind outside, set me on edge. I kept thinking about the man and his haunted expression. What had he been so afraid of? And why did he part with the desk so easily? Days turned into weeks, and the unease never quite left me. The desk, beautiful as it was, seemed to carry a heavy weight. I tried to forget the man's words and the contents of the journal, but they lingered in the back of my mind. Then one night, I woke to a sound I couldn't ignore. It was a faint rustling, like someone moving through the house. I sat up, heart pounding, and listened. The noise seemed to be coming from the room where I had placed the desk. Summoning my courage, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way down the hall. The house was dark and silent, but the feeling of being watched was palpable. I reached the room and slowly opened the door, shining the light inside. Nothing seemed out of place, but the air felt thick with tension. I approached the desk, the flashlight beam shaking in my hand. As I reached out to touch it, the rustling sound returned, louder this time, and I spun around to find the source. There, in the doorway, stood the man from the house, his eyes wide and filled with fear. "You shouldn't have taken it," he whispered, his voice echoing in the darkness. "Now they're coming for you." Before I could react, he vanished, leaving me standing in the cold, empty room. The realization hit me like a wave. Whatever had haunted him had followed the desk, and now it was my burden to bear.